Myung-bok, later Emperor Gojong, was the penultimate ruler of the Joseon Dynasty. More precisely, he was the last king of Joseon and the first emperor of the Korean Empire. His early years were dominated by his father, Lee Ha-eung, better known as Eungson Daewon-gun. Before Gojong proclaimed the Korean Empire in 1897, his reign was extremely turbulent. Joseon engaged in skirmishes with France, the United States, and Japan. Many unfair treaties were signed with foreign powers, and especially with Japan. There were many rebellions, like the Imo Incident, the Gapshin Coup, the Dongak Peasant Revolution, and the assassination of Empress Myeongsong. I have discussed all these major events in my previous 2 videos, which you can find on my channel. Here's a brief recap. Gojong had to flee the palace and resided in the Russian legation for a year from 1896 to 1897, following the assassination of his wife. Joseon at the time was very much in Imperial Japan's sphere of influence and had become independent from Qing China. Many reforms were enacted, namely the Gwangmu Reforms, that changed Joseon society profoundly. Many efforts were made to modernize the army, but it proved insufficient, especially against Western and Japanese armies. Slavery was abolished. Social classes were abolished too. Efforts were made to fight corruption amongst the elite. The common people was poor and underfed. All in all, Joseon met modernity and wasn't prepared at all and reacted too late. So here we are now in 1897. On October 13th of that year, Gojong declared himself Emperor of Korea, and Joseon became the Great Korean Empire. Gojong proclaimed that becoming emperor was the will of the people and that he wanted to eliminate the old and promote the new. A year earlier, in 1896, an independence club was created. They were for democratic Korea and wanted a constitutional monarchy. Gojong forcefully disbanded them in 1898. That same year, Gojong appointed himself Grand Field Marshal of the Imperial Korean Armed Forces and made his son a field marshal. He then appointed new marshals to a board of marshals and bought weapons from many countries. He sent recruits to the Imperial Japanese Army Academy in Tokyo for training. On August 17, 1899, the Constitution of the Korean Empire was enacted. It gave Gojong absolute power. The Gwangmu Reform started in 1897 and ended in 1904. Social status was abolished. A commoner and a yangban could communicate with each other using the same speech level. Also, yangban at the time used their clan name, called Bongwan. Most commoners, chonmin, didn't have one. They were required to have one when filling government papers, so most of them just used the name of their former master or landowner, or simply the clan name that was popular in their region. This might explain why present-day Korea has so many Kim, Lee, and Pak. These surnames are related to royalty. Lee or Lee to Joseon, Kim and Park or Pak to Shilla. Western-style suits and uniforms were introduced and became the norm for soldiers, policemen, diplomats, and even the royal family. Land reforms were enacted. A public electrical lighting network was constructed. Streetcars began to appear in Seoul. Modern factories were built. Western-style schools and hospitals began to appear. Some of these were built by Western missionaries. Colleges and universities followed. The Korean Daily News, now Seoul Shinmun, was established in 1904. The short hair order was reinstated. There was massive pushback when it was instated in 1895, so the government retracted the order. Gojong asked missionaries to help him institute this policy, Short hair was convenient and easier to wash. The color yellow, previously reserved for the Chinese emperor, was used by Gojong from that time on. Korean kings wore red in the past. Royal seals and symbols of power were adorned with dragons instead of turtles and bonghwang. The taegukgi was used as an emblem of the imperial household. The taegukgi, very similar to today's South Korean flag, was adopted as the national flag of Joseon in 1883. An important thing to note is that at this point in time, Joseon was weak. The military was deficient and the navy was non-existent. Bureaucrats were still quite corrupt, and officials were paid a small salary, and some weren't even paid. So government taxes were quite low. Taxes that should be sent to the central government often didn't make it there because of the local administration's outdated system and corruption. Also, centuries of Confucian thought wouldn't disappear in an instant for the sake of modernization. Many reforms didn't work well or took too much time to institute. Gojong was the subject of many assassination attempts. The first was in July of 1898. The second was in September of 1898, when an excessive amount of opium was put in Gojong's coffee, something he really enjoyed drinking. It failed, but it is said that Sunjong drank the coffee and it made him impotent. Gojong was asked to abdicate on many occasions, like in 1904 when some Korean students in Japan wanted to make Gojong's second son, Prince Imperial Ui, the new emperor. It is said that in 1901, 44% of the empire's revenue was injected into the military. Gojong tried to establish diplomatic relationships with foreign powers. He sent diplomats to London in 1901, but the UK didn't give them any attention and established a year later the Anglo-Japanese alliance. 1905 was a major year in Gojong's reign, a year where things would just go downhill for Korea's independence from this point on. In June of 1905, the American-Japanese Taft-Katsura Agreement was signed stipulating that the USA recognized Korea as a Japanese territory, and Japan recognized the Philippines as an American territory. In November of 1905, following Japan's surprise victory over Russia, Japan declared Korea a protectorate. The Russo-Japanese War of 1904 and 1905 was fought over both empires' territorial ambitions in Korea and Manchuria. The Eulsa Treaty was forcefully signed by Korea. Ito Hirobumi gave a letter from Mutsuhito, Emperor Meiji of Japan, to Gojong, who was threatened of bodily harm if he didn't sign it. Ito Hirobumi was the resident general of Korea, having been Japan's first prime minister before that. Gojong's cabinet signed the treaty. Gojong never envisioned signing this. Japan took complete control of Korea's foreign affairs, and all ports were open to Japanese trade. It took effect on November 17, 1905. 5 ministers signed the treaty and are forever remembered as the 5 Eulsa traitors. Korea had to disband its diplomatic representation abroad. Gojong sent personal letters to major heads of state like King Edward VII of the UK, Emperor Nicholas II of Russia, and Emperor Wilhelm II of Germany. He secretly sent 3 emissaries to the Second International Hague Peace Convention of 1907 to protest against the Eulsa Treaty. The Japanese heard about this and stopped the Koreans from attending. The Japanese and its Korean collaborators, called Chinilpa, heard about Gojong's call for help from foreign powers. They kept asking him to sign the Eulsa Treaty, but he refused. Song Byung-jun, a minister and founder of the Iljinhue, a pro-Japanese political society, that promoted the merging of Korean and Japan, demanded Gojong that he either goes to Japan himself and apologizes to the emperor, or apologizes to General Asegawa in front of the Daehan Gate. Talking to Gojong like this would have been absolutely unimaginable just a couple of years earlier. On July 18th of 1907, there was a cabinet meeting with the main point on its agenda being Emperor Gojong's abdication. Of course, Gojong refused. The meeting went on for hours with direct threats made to Gojong. Lee Byung-mu is remembered as one of the worst traitors in Korea. He drew his sword often on the king and used disrespectful language towards him, which, again, would have been completely unthinkable just a couple of years earlier. The meeting continued until the next day. External telephone lines were cut during the meeting. On July 19, 1907, Gojong declared that his son, Sunjong, would take his throne. July 20th, the abdication ceremony took place without Gojong and Sunjong attending. Gojong was confined to Doksu Palace. Sunjong became a kind of puppet king for the Japanese. 4 days later, the Japan-Korea Treaty of 1907 was signed. Korea's Prime Minister at the time, Lee Wan-yong, signed the treaty. His name became synonymous with traitor, Chinilpa. The treaty turned over the administration of Korea's internal affairs to Japan. The resident general would have the right to appoint and dismiss high-ranking officials. As a matter of fact, all high-ranking officials in Korea would be Japanese. Basically, Korea, its emperor, and its people couldn't run their country any longer. Korea's military would be rearranged with Japanese officers running it. In the month of October of 1909, Ito Hirobumi was assassinated by An Jung-gun in the city of Harbin in Manchuria. An Jung-gun was a Catholic and learned French. His baptismal name was Thomas. He exiled himself to Vladivostok in 1907, where he learned Russian. He became a lieutenant general of a small Korean resistance group. Him and his group were engaged in guerrilla activities against Japanese troops at various times. An Jung-gun had cut off part of his ring finger to show to all his comrades his resolve in making Korea independent again. His handprint is recognized all over Korea. On that fateful morning of October 26, 1909, after shooting Ito Hirobumi, he shouted 3 times, "Korea, ura!" An Jung-gun was arrested, imprisoned, and hanged on March 26, 1910. An Jung-gun was a Pan-Asian advocate, a belief in the union of the 3 great countries of East Asia, China, Korea, and Japan, to fight off Western imperialism. He wrote an unfinished essay titled On Peace in East Asia. At his trial, he put forward 15 reasons why he killed Ito Hirobumi. The obvious reasons, like forcing unequal treaties on Korea, killing the empress, and usurping the Korean government, were given. But he also said that he killed Ito Hirobumi because he deceived Emperor Meiji by telling him that the relations between Korea and Japan were peaceful, and stating that Ito Hirobumi killed Emperor Komei, the father of Emperor Meiji. There's no evidence of that, but to this day, Emperor Komei's death is seen as a little suspicious. An Jung-gun wished for a more peaceful and equal relationship between Korea and Japan, something that could be used as a model for all nations to follow. On August 22nd of 1910, the Japan-Korea Annexation Treaty was enacted. Korea became Japanese territory. It was signed by Lee Wan-yong and the new Resident General of Korea, Count Terauchi Masatake. The treaty came into effect on August 29th of that year. known in Korea as the Day of National Shame. The Joseon Dynasty ended after ruling Korea for 519 years. Gojong lost his imperial title, becoming King Emeritus I of Doksu, and became a member of the imperial family of Japan. He was confined to live in Doksu Palace. He tried to escape twice, in 1915 and 1918, but failed. He died on January 22, 1919, in Doksu Palace. He was 66 years old. It is speculated that he was poisoned. He's buried in Honggyunung in Namyangju. His son, Sunjong, was confined to Changdeok Palace with his wife, Empress Sunjong-hyo. They were both demoted to King and Queen I of Changdeok Palace in 1910. Sunjong died on April 24, 1926. He's buried, like his father before him, in Honggyunung. Sunjong didn't father any kids. Empress Sunjong-hyo died on February 3, 1966. This relatively small period of time in Korean history is very well documented, and talking about each event would require an entire series in itself. I tried to present what I think are the most important events during this time period. From 1910 to 1945, Korea was a part of the Empire of Japan and was called Chosen in Japanese. I will surely explore in a future video what Korea calls the Imperial Japanese Compulsive Occupation period. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Stay tuned for more videos on the rich history of Korea.